Welcome to GovCom Unfiltered, where your journey through the labyrinth of federal contracting begins. I'm Alexa Choi, your guide and host on this epic adventure. Here, we dive deep into the heart of government contracting, shedding light on the heroic tales of those who navigate its complex terrain. Our mission? To bring you closer to the action, revealing the critical steps, triumphant victories, and occasional pitfalls that our intrepid adventurers face. Your journey into the world of government contracting starts now, and we could not be happier to have you with us. Let's embark on this adventure together. Welcome to GovCom Unfiltered. Today our guest is Dr. Dolores. I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Dolores Kuchina-Musina. I'm the person you see on your LinkedIn post that reads all the stuff that you don't want to read and finds it entertaining.
Perfect. That's a great introduction. I love it. Oh, well, I've been looking forward to this interview for some time. You're one of my favorite entrepreneurs in the industry, young lady who I feel like is doing big things. I love to recommend you, your book, your energy to any event that I'm around. I'm just like really glad and been looking forward to this. So, number one, tell us your story. How did you get to be an award-winning published author, badass young chick at such a young age?
So I had to think through this question because I was trying to think of what is the biggest driver? And it has to be my stubbornness. I have been known since I was little to be very stubborn. And so when my mom would say, no, you can't do that, I'd go, well, let me show you that I can. And so it's kind of just gone throughout my life. I've had plenty of doors slammed in my face. People have told me that, no, that's not a good idea. And so just over time, I just kind of just decided of how to evaluate opportunities and things to say, okay, is this worth taking a chance? So even starting REXOTA, it was something that was kind of I had a friend that pushed me to do it. And he said, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? You have the perfect opportunity. And after about 2 weeks of my husband listening to me reevaluate and evaluate and talk about it, I said, you know what? He's right. If I don't do it now, when am I ever going to do it? So I said, fine, let's do it. And I just didn't want to, take no for an answer. So I've just been pushing through it, and at everything that I've wanted to do and set out to do, I just try to get it done. And if someone says no, it kind of drives me to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us about this company, because I know it exists, and I also love your logo. We'll talk about that later. But tell me, what does your company do?
So the company REXOTA is set up to help companies get better and more familiar with contract management. It's such a scary topic for a lot of people. And honestly, I just got tired of small businesses telling me they just signed the contract because they were excited that they got money. And I would go, well, did you read it? And they're like, no, it was 250 pages. What was I going to read? And I'm like, no, don't do that. So the whole idea of REXOTA is to help power companies through this whole topic of contract management, and for them to evaluate, can they hire people? Can their internal team do it? But really to get the company familiar and comfortable with their negotiation power. And so there's training, there's advising, there's consulting, there's process development. All of that is built in to help companies feel comfortable in the space, whether that's commercial contracting, government contracting, or contracting on an international level. It's meant to be there as a resource. And one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do is I didn't want to be a consultant that stayed with a company forever. I wanted to be there and make sure that I left an impact where they could do it on their own. And so I actually tell a lot of new clients, I'm only going to be here maybe for 2 years at maximum. After that, I mean, I'll stay if you want me to, but my intent is to empower you to do this on your own and for you to have what you need after I'm gone. And so I'm lucky to have just incredible clients that I absolutely love working with and keeping to that mission. And it's all in the innovative space, because I want to help the academics. I want to help the new companies and organizations that are like, we have this really cool thing, or we can do this really cool thing, but we have no idea how to protect ourselves. And I'm like, here we are, let me bring in, and if I don't know how to do it, I recommend them to the trusted partners I have, to the people that like legal, accounting, proposal writing, because I will not touch writing proposals. I did it before, I don't want to do it again. But I will read all the DFAR clauses, all of that for them to help them and explain what they all mean. because I don't want them wondering like, okay, well, now that I'm reading this, I don't get it. So that was what the
So,
company was set up to do.
so if I understand correctly, it's kind of like an extension of your contract's arm,
Yeah,
where they can come to you for, hey, we won this contract. What are the next steps? What does our reporting structure look like? Our responsibilities? Like, what do we need to do
yep,
next? Like that whole piece, which is
yeah,
really interesting if you think about it, because it's such an afterthought, like you said. People are
yeah,
like, woohoo, money. Like, wait, what do we do now?
yeah, yeah. Or even like some people will call me and they're like, I don't know if this is a space I want to be in. And I'm like, well,
Right.
evaluate. Let's do a total addressable market and get it down
Right.
to what client you're trying to serve. Are there opportunities that are
Right.
beneficial for you? And then talk about timeline, right?
Right.
Like people don't understand a lot of times that capture to like contract award could be a 3-year, 4-year
Oh,
process.
yeah.
If you don't have that kind of money or that time, maybe it is not the right space for you right now. That doesn't mean that
Right.
not ever, but at this very moment, let's talk about what that growth plan looks like. And so I help companies with that as well.
Wow. That's probably a really valuable thing to offer as well, because ultimately you could save somebody a bunch of money and time, effort, and energy as well, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. So let me back into one of the things you mentioned. You talked a little bit about the innovative space. I know you're in the mostly in the DoD space. More broad than just DoD. I think the other transaction authority, you're kind of known as an authority in that space. So how did you get into that space? Tell us a little bit about that as well. Because I mean, you and I know what an OTA is, but I don't know that everybody does. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found other transaction authorities not so long ago, actually. I was looking for a dissertation topic. I wanted something that combined my love for contracts, combined my love for science, because I grew up in a science household. My mom and my grandma are both physicists. So it was constantly was around me. I was always around in a lab or doing something, watching them do experiments. So I wanted to combine those two things in my dissertation topic. And at the time, I was working in the shipbuilding industry, which isn't as like sexy as this space, right? Some people think it's sexy. I'm not saying it's not, but for me, it was kind of like, okay, so shipbuilding is here, but there are people that are doing like really cool stuff. And I wanted to know like, how are they doing that? Because we have the federal acquisition regulations. We know how that works. We know how grants works, but there
Right.
had to be something else, like
Right.
something out there that allowed for this. So none of the academic literature that I was looking at really talked about anything that I thought was like, ooh, unique. I did not want to come up with my own theory. I did not want to propose my own conceptual model. I wanted to test something. I wanted to test, is something effective? And I went to actually NCMA, GCMS, which is no longer a conference that they do, but I went to that and I sat in one session where they talked about, other transaction authorities being this like hot, sexy new thing that everybody's doing. It allows for you to have all this flexibility to tailor this agreement the way that you want to. I go to another session where government is presenting and government's like, this has been around since the 1950s. It's not new. And I thought, well, this looks like an interesting topic. What is this all about? And so I reached out to my amazing mentor, Michelle Currier, who's at NCMA. And I said, I need to know who these OT experts are or other transaction experts are, because this can't be right. It can't be new and it can't be old all at the same time. Something's
No,
going on here. Something's
you'd be
interesting.
surprised.
Yeah. So I know. And when I got wiser, I found out a lot of things can be new and old all at the same time. And so the first person she introduced me to were some people at DARPA, because of course, why
Of
wouldn't I
course.
talk to people at DARPA to see if this was a good research project? But then she introduced me to Ben McMartin, and that's really how like him and I got to know each other. He was able to kind of just unlock this world and what it meant and what it was supposed to be. And so we actually started working together, I think, in 2018. He helped advise me, like he was my sanity check. I'm like, am I understanding this statute correctly? Am I understanding this correctly? And it was during that time that I also started supporting a proposal effort for an HHS bid for the company I was working at, which was a different company than where I was when I first started this journey. And I said, hey, this statute is totally different from Department of Defense. What's going on here? And he was like, that's an interesting question. What does it say? And I was like, what if we did a comparative study of all the statutes? And he's like, as any good mentor goes, you start that and then we'll talk. And I said, okay, so this giant spreadsheet started. And that's where that big graphic comes from, where we have all the statutes that we keep
Yeah.
updating regularly. So it just became a passion project. It is something, I think, what I view as the beauty of OTs is that it takes something of a creative mindset for you to look at a contract and for you to look at a scope of work and draft a government agreement in the shape that it's meant to be, to watch this project evolve, and something that where you start out with not knowing what it's going to look like. You're literally saying, I think this would be cool if we could fly, like if we could just have people just flying without a jetpack, like, and someone goes, hey, I would love to research how we could do that, right? And then they draft this agreement for what makes sense for the work. And that's what I really liked about it. It wasn't like a template that you put out there. It really blended my love for commercial contracting and government contracting together. And then the science piece came into it too.
Wow, what a great answer.
Thank you.
So, I mean, when I think about other transactions, right? Of course, you can't really talk about it without bringing up SIBRs and STTRs because, well, they don't fall underneath the OTA sort of a thing. They're different outside of that. They're still very interesting and applicable, I think, and they're less sexy than regular contracts or OTAs for that matter, but still a very good, viable option for contracting. So could you tell us a little bit about those two things? Something that people wouldn't know.
Yeah, so I will say I'll start with what everyone should know and be reminded of.
That's a good place to
Because
start.
because I feel like I talk about this a lot, but when it comes to the CIBR program, the whole purpose of it is to bring something to commercialization. It is not for the government to buy an off-the-shelf commercially available something and bring
Right.
it to the government. And what I have seen is, and this is across the board, like a lot of people have done this with a lot of statutes and authorities, but we forget what the law, what the mission of the policy of the law, of the statute regulation actually says. And reading the policy directive from cover to cover, it was very clear that that is like the missing piece that everyone forgets. What is the one thing people pay less attention to when they're putting their CIBR proposal on? It's the commercial plan, the commercialization plan. Why? Because there's templates out there. We fill them in, we submit them. The government says, this looks great, right? You sign it off. But the thought process of what does a true commercialization plan look like? And does it make sense for what you're bringing forth? The other thing that I think that a lot of people don't know, and they should know, is that the CIBR program that we have today is shaped after the NSF program. They were really the ones, the seed fund. They were the OGs of the space. And so everybody else followed suit, which is kind of crazy to think about because today, Department of Defense really leads the conversation. Even with the reauthorization happening next year, most of the eyes are again turned on Department of Defense. And that's because they're the biggest user. They're also the ones with the deepest pockets. They're the popular school. And so the attention is on them. But I think that those two things, like if you're looking at what is the CIBR program really supposed to look like, NSF really has a great model because they're the originators. They're the ones that kind of like shape this into what it is today. And then the whole purpose of it. It doesn't have to be the same exact product. That's the whole point of the phases. But you're bringing an idea, someone's concept that's supposed to better everyone's lives. That's what innovation's supposed to do. It's supposed to make our lives easier and bring it to the public. Now, certain aspects can be kept to the government because we know the government wants its part, but it is supposed to bring that forward for us to use. And I think we've lost that element with the CIBR program.
So you mentioned a reauthorization next year. What does that mean exactly?
Great question. So in 2022, Congress reauthorized. So every couple of years, the CIBR program comes up in front of Congress and they say, do we keep this program? And so 3 years ago, it came up for Congress. You may not remember the trauma on LinkedIn of everyone waiting for the Senate, for the House to approve the different variations of this reauthorization, but it literally came to the wire. Like at 11:59 on September 30th, it was like everyone was watching to see, did we sign this thing? If not, we are screwed. So we're coming up on it again in 2025 because Congress only reauthorized it for 3 years.
Oh, well,
And so it,
that's not nerve-wracking or anything.
no, so all of the companies that are looking at SIBRSIT are thinking, should I try it? If you want to try it now, not because I don't think it'll get reauthorized, but only
Right.
because what we saw last time was a lot of things got put on pause right before the reauthorization, and it makes sense.
Right.
Because you got to make a good decision on what's going on. But if you're planning to go after a SIBR-sitter, do it now, don't wait, because 6 months before September 30th, a lot of things are going to start slowing down, especially with awards, and a lot of them might get paused. So just be aware of that if you're planning to apply.
So the STTR program is for schools, right? Like Johns Hopkins, hypothetically, could apply, or other universities like that, right?
So you have to have a research institution with you, yes, but you can have a private sector entity bid on a sitter as well. It could be like a partnership. You just have to have.
Got it. So is it an R1 school? Does it have to be an R1 school, or can it be any research entity?
So the way it's defined is it says a research institute as defined in the solicitation, which the best part is most solicitations don't define research institute in their solicitation. But the best test for it, I think, is find a university that does research. Obviously, you want to find someone that has a lab or is doing research or has experts in that field.
Right.
Because you're going to have to list them as the personnel working on the research, working on the development. So it's going to be very easy for someone to be like, why are you putting, someone in microbiology on a project that has to do with, software development that's looking at space and astrophysics? Like you're going to have to draw the line as to why you're bringing these people in.
Right. All right, cool. That's interesting. I really like that program a lot because both of those, combined with the OTAs, kind of gets you out of the regular federal procurement cycle, which always takes longer than you think, like you said, between 3 and 4 years. It's very much, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of rules and regulation. There's just a whole bunch of things, right? But when you do OTAs or you do some of these other procurements other ways, it really opens up the aperture on what you can achieve, really, and approach it from what are we trying to do here, rather than trying to align a project to a contract type, which seems a little weird to me.
I mean, it's all how you frame it. You can use the bar to do incredible stuff. You have to know how to leverage the language. I think the benefit of SIBR and SITR is that you're not subject to the fiscal calendar that we are all subject to for the federal budget, because it runs on a different timeline. And you can plan, that pretty much every 6 months, there's going to be a solicitation coming out. Unlike for what we experience with the GWACs or the government-wide acquisition contracts, right? Where it's we're going to wait 3 years under this draft request for proposal. And then bam, everybody go right before Christmas, right? You don't have that anticipation. You should know that it's coming, and you have about 30 days to prepare your response, plus the 30 days to submit your response. So it gives you an opportunity, especially to someone new to this world, to set everything in motion ahead of time and not have to worry about all those other things that you would have to work with when doing traditional procurement.
I hope if anybody's listening to this and is interested in other transaction authorities or sitters or SIBRs, will reach out to Dr. Dolores, because she did mention her dissertation and she passed it, so she is now Dr. Dolores. Okay, moving on. Tell us about your logo, something very serious. We gotta get serious here.
Oh, we have to get to the logo. So who doesn't love dinosaurs and unicorns?
I love dinosaurs and unicorns, like my 2 favorite things.
Yeah, so why not combine them into one? And so the story behind the logo is I did a presentation for Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, and I used the term dinocorn for the first time in that presentation. And so when I was thinking of a logo, it came up again as doing some kind of dinosaur. And so the only one that was appropriate was Velociraptor, because as nerds do, you have your favorite dinosaur. And so my husband, Clint, he's a T-Rex and I'm the Velociraptor. And so that's why the logo is a velociraptor unicorn, but it also has meaning. So one of the things that's really important for me is understanding why policy is passed the way that it is, or why something exists. Like, what was the reason? What was the intention behind this? And so we've heard of the acquisition dinosaurs, right? It's all of the people with all the institutional knowledge that are getting ready to retire. And generally, we think of them in a negative way. I love those people because if you ask them, like, how did FAFSA come about? Or, how do we get to commercial acquisition or procurement? If you find the right person, you could be on the phone with them for like hours just listening to the debates that people were having. Like, all of that is so important to understand how to implement these policies. And then the unicorn, because everyone wants a unicorn, the unicorn signifies creativity. It signifies thinking of things in a new way. Also, those rare people, and there's not a lot of people that wrote their dissertation on OTAs. There's, I think, 3 total. And one of them is a lawyer, one of them is a nerd, and another one, it was in government as well. So it's like, I'm the only industry person that wrote on the topic. And I'm hoping there will be more, but I wanted to combine those 2 ideas and those 2 thoughts in one logo. And honestly, I just didn't want to be like all the other consultants that are in the space. I wanted something fun, something that was more welcoming. I don't know why a dinosaur seemed more welcoming, but to me it did. That's what happened.
I love it. I mean, you just approached it from like a very cool, hip way. And I think the industry really responds accordingly, which is great. Because, to be honest, in this industry, it's pretty buttoned up. Like you go to any event and everybody's like, hey, have you seen my friend? He's in a blue suit and a red tie. I'm like, really, dog? Everybody's in a blue suit and a red tie, right?
Yep.
So just coming at it differently, like with a cool logo and a fun energy, like it's just great. I love it. All right,
Yeah.
so big question. How can the industry be more innovative when the government is inherently all about risk and risk aversion?
Okay, when you sent me this question, I was like, I love, 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 love this question.
Ah,
Because I think it's also a perception of what we can't see that happens in the government.
right.
Industry, and I'm sure you already know this, and other people that follow me on LinkedIn have heard me talk about this. In the 1980s, there was a hard split. It just looks like an X. Industry skyrocketed with innovation and funding innovation, while government kind of just did one of these. It just kind of declined in terms of how much budget. And rightfully so. There was no mission, there was no call to action like we had with the space race to invest in
Right.
something that's innovative. And why would we want to when we see industries like taking it off? The public good is already there, right? Industry has the means. And we saw the biggest technological revolution happen in the last 30 years. Right now, we're seeing another one with AI, and it's incredible what industry has done. I think what we miss with government is there's a lot of innovation happening internally that is not public, and we just
Right.
never talk about it. We never hear it. And government became risk averse for very good reasons. They were being overcharged. There was a lot of issue with validating commercial pricing because, as you know, right, being on the industry side, someone's pricing on industry is not the same as the other. We as consumers know that. Like we were just looking at contractors for siding for our house, for example.
Right.
The options that's included in the pricing is different across all 4 contractors that we talked to. Some people did wrapping, some did painting, some had some colors of siding, some didn't have others. And for the government, can you imagine receiving 200 proposals with all those varying options and trying to figure out, how do you standardize this? How do you look at this? And then you put on something innovative, like, we don't know how to do this. We don't know what the end product looks like. We want you to give us a price based on your expertise of what it looks like.
Right.
As someone fresh in the entrepreneur world, right, trying to decide my own pricing 3 years ago, trying to figure out how to price out, where do I get a lab? Where do I get lab equipment? How do I
Right.
do this? What is my risk? What is my profit? What is my profit margin? What is my management reserve supposed to be on
Right.
there? Of course, your price is going to be super high. And so it's a huge risk for the government to say, that number looks great. Like, I don't think that number makes sense. So that looks great. And so I think what we saw in the early 2000s was a lot of risk aversion, because we had what happened during early 90s, where there was a lot of, I would say, like, contractor abuse with the government system. There was a lot of cases about that in the 90s. in the 2000s, everyone that experienced that was like, well, prison is not worth this. So I would rather be safe. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden in the 2010s, right at the end, all of the leadership in government is like, go break things. And people are like, you're going to have to wait a minute because I'm going to stay out of prison and you're saying to go break things. How am I supposed to do that? So we have a little bit of change management going on.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
with the friends that I have in the government, I hear about like, hey, this is like, I'm working on something really cool. They can't tell me what it is, but they're like, we're solving a problem that we were thinking of bidding, but we decided we have the experts to build it ourselves. That's amazing. We would never hear that in the public, right? Like, we don't hear like the government has built something cool. We usually hear,
Yeah.
company ABC built something really cool for the government, or somebody's doing this in the AI space. So I think it's a perception thing. It's what gets more media. And also, you toot your own horn when you're successful. The
Right.
things that I think the government is working on are so risky that they're not going to highlight the failure of the experiment because people love bad news. They love to see,
Tax.
a failure of someone, a waste of tax dollar money. And I do air quotes because
Okay.
when you're inventing something, it is not it is not a linear path. So if
Right.
you are learning from that and you're iterating, it's not a waste.
Right.
But I also know how the media tends to portray stuff. So we just have to be more careful. And I think in some sense, we have to make the government feel comfortable with it. I think there's a lot of movement in the right direction. There's a ton of people right now. There's an uprising, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Alexa. There's so many people that are willing to be change makers, whether it's to help the government, in the government, or even people leaving industry to go to the government, which I think
Oh,
is
yeah.
significant. And
Yeah.
it's starting. And I think that's something to take of note, where we're going to see some change, but just like any large bureaucratic organization, we will not see the results of that until 2030. Today,
Yeah.
it looks like no progress is being made. And then
Right.
randomly in 2030, we're going to see something big happen. And that's my prediction, but we'll see what happens.
Love it. Put it on the table, prediction time. Well, I actually kind of agree with you on that. I interviewed Mark Schwartz. I think his interview with me is live. And he used to be the CIO of USCIS. And then he went to go write more books and be fancy pants at AWS. And I was talking to him, I was like, are you going to come back? And he was like, I just might. And I was like, oh, we need you now. Come now. He's like, why don't you go? Okay. First of all, that wasn't the question. So yeah, no, I think it's a really exciting time. And never in my career, in my almost 20-year career in GovCom, have I ever been tempted to work for the government until now. I feel like now it feels very interesting. It feels exciting. Like even if it looks like nothing's being done, it feels exciting,
Yeah,
right?
I think we're like on a precipice. I think we're
Yeah,
at a moment where we're at a decision point where it's
right.
gonna like take off and be something really awesome, or we're
Yeah.
gonna come to a screeching halt and we're gonna question why we didn't take the other path.
Hopefully we take the right path.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. And I think this is one of like the missions of the work that you do and the work that we do at G2X and Forum, is trying to bring industry and government together so we can take the best use cases of both innovative pieces and put them together and see if we can, move this forward.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, you had to bring up AI. It was not on my question list at all, but you mentioned it, so now we have to talk about it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so but the question was what excites you the most about the future? But let's take an AI spin. What excites you the most about the AI future?
So what excites me about the AI future is I think it forces people to learn something new. The memes, the senior manager that doesn't know how to convert Word into PDF, or those types of things. I've been there. I know that feeling. I know exactly how it feels, right? Where you're like, really? Like, I know you make like 6 times my salary and you're asking me how to turn this into a PDF, or like vice versa, when you don't have the license and they do. So I think what AI does is it forces people. I think it forces people to try something new, to utilize something. And to be honest, I mean, it is being shoved into our lives. Everything has AI in it. Like
Yeah,
your,
everything.
your app to buy groceries has AI. At some point, you don't need the AI tool there, but it's just
Yeah.
there because it's cool. But again, at what point do you get that adoption from everyone? And I think what it's doing is, like I said, it's almost like a revolution again, in a way that we saw with computers in the 90s. It's forcing people to understand that there's a better and easier way to do stuff. The implications, of course, on the legal side, because that also is like amazingly interesting. There's things that we have to still work through. But to be honest, like on the government side and government contracting, what I'm seeing is the government is having a hard time from a policy standpoint, keeping up with technological improvements and advancements. So the policy that we have today isn't going to work for when it actually passes in 2-3 years. With AI, I think it will allow for people to get more information faster versus like having all the meetings that they're doing. And I'm not saying there's no value in that, but it'll help them do some of their research as long as they're using a trusted site.
Right.
But I think that's what excites me the most is it's forcing people to use new technology. I mean, people are loving creating images. They're liking creating their own recipes. Like you can go in and create recipes. You can create your own schedule. The only thing that I wish AI did, and I absolutely love this, I forget which page posted this, but it was, I wish AI anticipated what I needed help with versus me asking for help. I think we'll get there. But again, for someone to get more organized on their calendar or to have someone help them with things like that, where before you had to pay experts to do it, now you have someone that's able to help you. With you just doing it late at night, you know, instead of scrolling on Instagram, you can like quickly like type out your schedule for tomorrow. I think that's exciting.
Yeah. No, this is it's such an exciting time to be alive. I have to tell you, one of my favorite AI things I've seen recently was when you're looking at something on Amazon and you look at the reviews, because I'm a review reader, okay, and you scroll down there and it's like, 4,000 reviews have said these things, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to go read all these things now. This is so awesome. But the challenge is that it has to be right. Right? I was talking about this earlier today because we're in a lot of design phases for G2X, and I was like, look, it can look as pretty as you want it to, but if the data's not right, it doesn't matter. So, I think we're gonna have to do a lot of data cleanup, because I feel like there's a lot of people skipping over that step. They're like, ooh, fancy AI tools, woohoo! But like, what about data governance, data architecture, data cleansing, data dedupe, all that stuff? Like, we're just going from here to here, but then like, so when I read the Amazon reviews, I'm like, do I trust it? Do I look and see? And so getting lazy and not bringing your brain to work, really question things is like, I asked Claude something the other day and I was like, are you sure? And Claude was like, no, actually, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. And I'm like, bro, I thought we had an agreement. Why are you lying to me right now? So, it's really tricky.
I think it is, but again, I think it comes to the point that it'll be much easier for us to identify the people that know the research and understand it versus the people that right now, for us, we're like, oh my gosh, how did this person read this entire paper in this quick amount of time? I mean, for me, for example, for a lot of these policy documents, like when I first started doing a lot of my research, I was like, oh, I'll just read this article that summarizes it. And I read it and I was like, I mean, this doesn't really give me all of it. And then I open up the policy document and I read it from top to bottom. I'm like, there's so many good nuggets in here that got missed. Like the NDAA, every single year, I have to do my own word search. I have to scrub it completely by myself. There's not a single source that covers what I'm interested in. So I have to constantly look for it myself and find it. So I think we'll see a lot of that where we're like, something's not right here. And the people that are asking that question, I think, are going to come out on top.
Yeah, for sure. I encourage everybody listening to this to bring your brain to work, even if AI exists.
Yes.
Forever.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move on to our last two questions because I knew this was going to happen, but we're going to get embroiled in some great convos, and so the time was going to fly. So question number one is, I asked these two questions to everybody, and it's my dream one day to put a book together like Tim Ferriss, like Advice of Mentors kind of thing. If somebody was watching you and they were inspired by your journey, which I think a lot of ladies probably are, what would be two pieces of advice you would give somebody?
Okay, this is the one that I had to think about for like a really long time because I don't want to give like recycled advice. I want to give fresh advice.
Ooh,
Um,
fresh advice. Okay, ma'am.
So the first one that I thought of that I think is really important is you have to be able to listen to all of the advice that you're getting. But the final decision on whether or not you take that advice is entirely up to you. And you should not take all the advice that you're given because not all of it is from your perspective. A lot of people are coming in with their own biases, with their own opinions of what your capabilities are. And so if you know what's best for you and you're willing to test it, do it. But keep in mind what people are guiding you to look out for. So that would be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, I think, is like life advice. And this one, and I don't know if you've heard this quote, but some people are there for a reason, some people are there for a season. And so making sure that you have the right people with you.
Yeah.
I don't know whose quote that is, but I know I've read it somewhere. And that really stands out to me because there are people there that are just there to get you over that hump, that are just there for that temporary amount of time. You do not have to keep them in your life forever. Some people are there to be lifelong supporters for you. They're meant to be mentors, coaches, they're meant to be your friends, and they may change that role throughout your life. They do not have to be in that same role forever. And so making sure that you understand that the people in your life that you keep for a long time, they are there for that reason. You've identified that reason for them. The people that are just there for a season, they are just temporary. And that doesn't mean that's bad. That doesn't mean that they're terrible people. It just means that that is what they came in your life to be there for. And so just understand that as you're going through your career, whatever stage of career you're at. People, I know my mom right now is going through this herself of, she's about to become an empty nester. My sister is leaving for college. She's 18 years younger than me. It's a new phase in her
Wow.
life. So she has to find new people to surround her, to support her. And not a lot of people understand that part of their lives. And so those would be my two biggest pieces of advice.
I think one of those are really good, by the way. I love it. One of the things about leaning into shift and change, which sound like the second piece, is, imagine if it worked out way better than you ever imagined. Because you know what? It usually does, to be honest with you. It usually, like, even if like you told yourself, like, okay, a year from now, I'm gonna be doing ABC and it's gonna be, whatever, whatever. Every single year, I'm like completely floored at what I'm doing with my life. I mean, sometimes it's not always floored in a good way, but I'm
Right?
always like, wow, this took a left turn, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just have to like stay like, I think you were saying that kind of thing, like leaning in, right? I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not always good, right? Like sometimes you have to roll with the punches. Like
Yeah.
life can knock you down. It can absolutely obliterate you. And you have to know who are the people that are going to be there, that are going to pick you up, dust you off, remind you of who you are, and get you back on track. You have to know who those people are. That is critical.
Finding your tribe. I love that for sure. Cool. All right. So last question. What is your superpower, ma'am? And how did you know when you found it?
So for this one, I'm going to stick with my stubbornness. It's my superpower. And I think I realized that it was a superpower and not a flaw when I started the business. And again, I'm gonna give props to my amazing husband Clint, who always makes the Thanos reference, the fine, I'll do it myself. Because he has seen it. He has seen where someone has completely just like knocked me on the ground, right? They're like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think this is dumb. I don't think you deserve to be in the space. And I get myself up. My husband dusts me off and he's like, you know what you have to do? And I'm like, I'll have to do it myself. And he's like, you're absolutely right. And so that's going to be my superpower. I'm going to get a shirt eventually. I know he's going to get me a shirt with Thanos on it that says it. That would be my superpower.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it's a good tenacity kind of a thing,
Yeah.
It's this industry's not easy. It's a grind, man. It doesn't matter what part you're in either, whether you're doing BD and capture for a company or, whether you're whatever side, whether you're working for the government, executing mission, delivery, all
Yeah.
of it, or consulting like you, it's tough. It's a tough industry. So I think
Yeah.
stubbornness and being like, I will succeed and I will make an impact and it will be good. That's like putting a stake in the ground and being like, I'll do this is awesome.
Yeah. Angela Duckworth, right? Grit. Like I had a very
Yeah.
high grit
Oh,
score.
yeah. Yeah.
And I attribute a lot of that to my PhD. That is one of the hardest things I have
Oh.
ever had to do, and a project I've ever had to finish. So grit and stubbornness, perseverance, all of that. Those are like I'll collect my 5 stones. I'll grit, perseverance. I'll get the other 2.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that. Well, catch us next time on GovCom Unfiltered. But for today, thank you so much, Dolores.
Thank you so much, Alexa. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, so fun.
As we draw the curtain on today's chapter of GovCom Unfiltered, I want to thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey through the intricate world of federal contracting. I'm Alexa Choi, and it's been an honor to navigate these stories of courage, innovation, and resilience with you. Until we meet again, keep pushing boundaries, exploring new horizons, and making your mark in the government contracting universe. Farewell for now, but not forever. Stay tuned for more adventures that await in the next episode of GovCom Unfiltered. Safe travels on your path to greatness, and remember, we are all on this journey together.